everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have my top 10 Dollar Tree Easter DIYs all in one spot for you. If you're new here, make sure to hit the subscribe button and don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss out on any DIYs. Also, make sure to follow me over on Instagram and Facebook at Jessica Lynn at Home for updates on my farmhouse fixer-upper. Alright, let's get started. Okay, here's what I need to make the bunny wreath. I have two small wreaths from Dollar Tree, and then I have one large wreath. I have some burlap ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and then I have just a bunch of flowers that I got from the Dollar Tree, just different kinds. You can use whatever you'd like. And then I also have my hot glue gun, extra glue sticks, floral wire, and wire cutters right here. So let's get started. Okay, first off, I'm going to assemble the body and the head of the bunny, and all I'm going to do for that is use my floral wire and wrap it around the middle here and then cut it when I'm done. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Okay, now I'm gonna try to make the ears out of this extra little wreath I got. I'm not really sure how I'm gonna do this. I'm just kinda gonna take it apart and then try to piece it back together to make it look like bunny ears. So let's see if it works. Okay, out of that wreath, I got two twigs that were bent that kind of looked like the shape of bunny ears. So I went ahead and I'm going to use those to attach to the wreath to make the bunny ears. And how I'm going to attach them is I'm just going to use a little dab of hot glue on the wreath. And then I'm going to take the bottoms of the twigs that are broken apart and then just kind of shove them into the wreath and hold them in place until it dries for a second. And then I'm going to do that on the other side. Okay, next I'm going to use this bunch of baby's breath here to start out with. And then I'm just going to pull the flowers off here from the stem. Like that. And then I'm going to take this little round thing off here with my wire cutters and just come in here and snip it off. So I'm gonna attempt to tie a bow for the bunny and to put like around his neck to cover that wire up. So I'm not the greatest at making bows, but I'm gonna make it work. Okay, so I'm going to take the last bunch of baby's breath and I'm going to line the ears with it, and I'm just going to use my hot glue. I'm going to snip the top off here, so I just have the flower head right here, and then just going to place a little dollop of glue on the ear and go around the whole ear just like that. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to get started with is 2 of these signs from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to peel off the little bunnies at the bottom. They're really easy to peel off, they come right off. And then I'm going to take some sandpaper and I'm going to sand the front of the bunnies to get all of the glitter off, and then I'm also going to give the back just a little bit of sanding from where I peeled off the tape. The bunnies were really easy to sand because there wasn't that much glitter on them, so it came off fairly easily. Then I went ahead and gave each bunny a coat of white chalk paint by Rust-Oleum, and then I came back with 2 wooden dowels from Dollar Tree, and I wanted my bunnies to be facing each other, so I turned one bunny over and then placed the dowel on the back of that bunny, and then left the other bunny face forward and glued the dowels on. Then I came back with some more white chalk paint and gave each bunny 2 more coats of paint, and I also painted the dowels about halfway down. Once the bunnies were mostly dry, I came back with my gel stain in the walnut color and my foam brush, and I just brushed on to the sides of the bunny just to give it more of a weathered old look. And then I wanted the bunny tails covered in twine, So I turned the bunnies over and I placed a piece of twine on where the tail started, and then I hot glued that down and then just wrapped the twine around the bunny tail until I got almost to the end. And then I came back with some more hot glue and glued the twine down a little bit more. And then once I got more towards the end and it got a little bit smaller, I just coiled that twine around and hot glued it. And then I just did the same thing to the other bunny tail. Next, I took another one of these Spring Bunny signs from Dollar Tree and removed the spring banner. You may have seen me do this in my last video for my wreath. It's really easy to do. And then I placed my bunnies facing each other and placed the banner on their little hands and hot glued them down so like they're holding the banner. Next, I'm going to use one of these Flowers and Gardens tin from Dollar Tree, and then I just placed in some floral foam. I didn't have enough floral foam, so that way when I set my bunnies in, the dowels went into the floral foam. So what I did was just hot glue the dowels to each side of the tin, and that actually worked out really well. Then I just added some Spanish moss to the tin, and then I took these little dusty succulent flowers that come from Dollar Tree, and I added about 5 bunches. I did cut the stems off of them and then bunch them together and put them in place where I wanted them to go. And that was it. I think this turned out so cute for spring or Easter. You could leave it up all spring since it doesn't say anything about Easter on it, but I think it is perfect for Easter too because of the little bunnies. So I just love how this turned out. It's perfect for a centerpiece on my table. This first DIY, I'm using one of the Dollar Tree white foam boards, and I'm getting my inspiration from this Floral Bunny wreath from Pier 1. It's $59.99, and I thought I could recreate it for a lot less out of Dollar Tree items. So I'm taking the foam board and I'm just using a pencil and tracing out the shape of my bunny the way I want it to look. So it doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of get a little silhouette of a bunny. You can use a stencil if you need to, make yourself a stencil, and then I'm just going to cut it out with a box cutter that is from Dollar Tree. Then I am taking some reindeer moss from Dollar Tree. I used 2 and about a half bags to cover the front of this bunny up. I just used spray adhesive and applied the moss on top of the spray adhesive, and then used some more spray adhesive on top of the moss to kind of hold it all in. And this is so that way if I don't have enough flowers to cover every little inch of this bunny, you'll be able to see moss instead of the white foam board. The flowers that I'm using are 1 bunch of these peachy pink roses, 2 bunches of the light peach pink roses, a bunch of these peonies, 1 bunch of these carnations, and 1 bunch of, I'm not sure how to pronounce these flowers, they're really tiny, and then 5 bunches of the white hydrangeas. I'm just using what I found at Dollar Tree and putting everything together. So use what you can find and what colors you like at your own Dollar Tree to put it together. And I also could have done this for a lot less than what I spent. I spent $15 on making this bunny, but you could definitely do it probably for under 10. My bunny just turned out to be really big, so you could definitely do this for a lot less with a lot less flowers as well. So I started off with the roses because they are the biggest out of the flowers, and as you saw, I just cut the tips off of the bottom of the roses, and now I'm just hot gluing them into place. Next, I did the peonies, and I just placed everything out before I actually glued anything down, so that way I can make sure it filled up all the spaces. is. The next one I did was the carnations, and I just placed those all around to make sure that I liked them, and then hot glued those down. And then I did the hydrangeas last because they're the smaller ones out of all of these. They come in a bunches, but they're smaller bunches, so I had to kind of bunch them all together. I didn't cut anything off the bottom of these to glue these down. I just applied some hot glue to them and then just glued them to the moss. Then the last flowers that I did were the ones that I couldn't pronounce, and they just came off with one flower head, and those were just used to fill in the rest of the gaps where you could see the moss and things like that. And those ones didn't sit as far down in between the flowers. I kind of pulled them up a little bit, so I hot glued those kind of to the other flowers, if that makes sense, and not so much to the moss, so that way they set up a little bit and you could see them better, and they would cover up more spots and be more of a filler flower like what I needed. Now once I was all done with that, I could still see some white around the edges where the moss didn't get all the way around the edges. So I took the rest of the half a bag of moss that I had left, and I just applied some hot glue around the edges on the back side to cover that up so you couldn't see any white and it looked clean and finished. Then the last thing I did was take some of this white lace ribbon from Dollar Tree and make a little hanger, and I think this turned out so beautifully for $15 and perfect for Easter.
But we're still free and running, and this day has never kept us bothering. Every day we dance and life's been smiling. We're not young, still drunk in love. Oh, I got you, there's no reason to.
This second DIY is pretty easy to do. I'm going to start out with one of these stretched canvases from Dollar Tree, and I don't need the canvas, so I'm just going to flip it over and remove the staples on the back with a little pry bar. This canvas that I'm using is an 8x10 size. Now I'm just going to set the frame aside, and I have these speckled Easter eggs from Dollar Tree. They have holes in the bottom of each one of the eggs, but I need holes in the top of them as well. So I'm just going to take my hot glue gun that's heated up, and I'm going to press the tip of it into the top of each one of these eggs to melt the plastic to make a hole. Now that I have 2 holes in each egg on the top and the bottom of each one, I'm going to use this floral wire that I already had, and I'm just going to string all of the eggs onto this floral wire. Now I'm not gonna lie, this was the hardest part of this DIY. I had to do the whole squinting with one eye and looking down the hole and pushing the wire up through the other hole. It was a little bit difficult. If you guys have another suggestion on how to string these, let me know. But it did work out. It took me about probably a little less than 10 minutes to get them all strung and just focusing on what I was doing. Once the eggs were all on the wire, I just went ahead and cut the excess wire and then brought the 2 wires together at the top and made a circle with the eggs and then twisted the wires together tightly so that way I wouldn't lose the circle shape. Then I just took some of this lace ribbon from Dollar Tree and wrapped it around the top of my little egg wreath and then placed the ribbon around the frame and hot glued that down to the front and the back of the frame. Then I went ahead and decided to make a bow with the lace ribbon. So I tied that and then I just hot glued that to the top of the ribbon and the frame. And I think this turned out so cute, and it was a fun, easy little project to do for Easter.
Stay every night and day. I'm delighted 'cause I got you.
For this last DIY, I was kind of just creating as I went. I wasn't exactly sure what was going to happen at the end of this, but I got out these 2 clay pots from Dollar Tree. They come in a pack of 2, and I painted them with some pink chalk paint that I had mixed for Valentine's Day, and then I decided to print out on my Cricut Hippity Hop and Happy Easter, and I went ahead and applied them to the front of the clay pots. This is the font, the skinny, so it kind of looks like the Ray Dunn font, and I didn't have any transfer paper. That's why I was doing it this way, but it worked out. Then I had these two pom-poms, so I thought about bunny bottoms, and these kind of looked like bunnies, and they were fluffy and furry, so that's kind of what I was going for in these clay pots, were some bunny bottoms sticking out of the pots. So I went ahead and just cut off the keychain part of the pom-poms, and then I hot glued the little pom-poms to the very top side front of the clay pots. Then I had these two little burlap bunnies from Dollar Tree, and I just wanted the ears off of them, so I just pulled the ears off, and then I hot glued them to the back side of the bunny, so that way it looked like the back of the bunny ears, and the front side of the ears were facing the other side of the pot. I was originally going to put some like flowers or some carrots in the other side of the pot where the bunny's head would be, but then I decided to do something different while I was crafting. So I went ahead and had this little yarn bunny kit from Dollar Tree, and I pulled it out to make the little bunny feet. So I just took the 4 pieces of white felt out, and I stacked them on top of each other to kind of cut them in more of an oval shape. And then I used that same pink chalk paint and just painted the little pads of the bunny's feet onto the felt. I was originally going to use the pink felt that came with this little crafting kit for the pads of the feet, but that didn't work out because it was too hard to cut these small little circles that I needed for the pads. Once the paint was all dry on the feet, I just went ahead and attached them to the front of the pot and the back of the bunny. I just used a little bit of hot glue to secure them down on both of the pots. So originally this idea would have been done after the feet were applied, and I would have just put some flowers in the back of these, but I decided to not let that little crafting yarn kit go to waste, and I am using the 2 bigger yarn balls in the back of the pot and using those as the little bunny heads and applying the little pom-poms for eyes and noses, and then the other little pom-poms that come with the kit, applying those to the back of the bunny as the tails. And I think this DIY turned out super cute. It's a 360 DIY. You can turn it all the way around and you have a full bunny. Alright, for this project, it's really simple. I am going to be making a cute little bunny tray, and I'm going to be using these ceramic painting sets from Dollar Tree. I have 3 of them, and then I'm just going to be removing the hangers from on top of the bunny's heads. All I did was just use some pliers to pull out the hangers. Then I'm going to use one of these glass plates that comes from Dollar Tree. Mine is already painted because I am repurposing it from an older project. And all I'm going to do is I am going to arrange my 3 bunnies in a circle, and I'm just going to test out the plate on top of them just to make sure that I like how it looks. Then I'm going to take some hot glue and put a dab on top of each bunny's head. I would recommend using E6000 as well because the hot glue will not hold it for very long. After I put the hot glue on top, I am just going to place the plate on top there, and pretty much it is done. All I did was take it outside and give it a fresh coat of white paint. Now you could paint this any color you want. I think it would be really cute in a pastel pink or blue or green for spring or Easter. And then also you can display it however you want. I have this cloche that I made from a Dollar Tree bowl a long time ago and just put an old wooden knob that I painted white on top of it. And then I just put some Dollar Tree eggs and some of the Excelsior grass inside of it as well. And I think it turns out really cute. Okay, for this next project, I was inspired by a sign I saw on Amazon and on JCPenney's website, and it costs around $30 or so I thought I could make it myself out of these Dollar Tree items. So I'm using 2 of these egg Easter signs from Dollar Tree, and all I'm doing is removing the backs off of the eggs, and I'm going to be using 6 eggs. Now there are 2 different sizes of eggs that I didn't realize until halfway through. So you'll want to use 3 bigger eggs and 3 smaller eggs. Now all I'm doing is sanding the backs of the eggs, because that is what I'll be using. I'm not going to touch the front with the glitter and all that. I'm just going to sand the back a little bit to make it smooth. And then I'm going to give each egg 1 coat of white chalk paint. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back after they are dry, and I am just going to take my sandpaper and sand around the edges and a little bit in the middle to give this more of a distressed look. So here is where I'm going to show you there are 2 different sizes of eggs. They are barely noticeable, but they are 2 different sizes. So I am going to just lay out my eggs and alternate in between the big and the small. So I'm going to start with a big one, then a small one, then a big one, then a small one, then a big one, then a small one. And that's how my sign is going to be laid out. So for the lettering, I decided to just do some hand lettering, and all I did was have my phone open and I was looking at the inspiration photo and trying to just copy that with a pencil onto each of the eggs. So I would recommend, though, because this took a long time to do, unless you're really good at hand lettering, I would definitely recommend to get some stencils or to print out in Word the letters that you want, and then come back and transfer those letters with a pencil onto the piece that you're doing. Because like I said, this did take a long time to do each of these letters and get them the way I wanted them. But it worked out in the end for me. So if you have time, it will work out. But if you are short on time, definitely do it one of the other 2 ways. After the letters were all traced out, I went back in with my Sharpie paint pen and just traced over the letters and then filled them in. So next I needed to make some bunny ears for the tops of 3 of my letters. So for that, I'm going to be using one of these cloths from Dollar Tree. I used it in a previous project, and then some of this floral wire that I already had. Now you could take the bunny ear headbands from Dollar Tree and just cut off the ears and use those, but since I had these products already on hand, that's what I'm going to be using. So what I did was I just cut a piece of wire off, folded it in half, and then twisted the bottom parts together, and then I just kind of formed it into an ear shape, and then I cut the excess wire off the bottom. Then I took the cloth and I just cut a square out of that would fit around my wire ear shape. So then I just took some hot glue and I put it on the wire and folded 1/2 of the cloth over that wire and kind of formed it to the ear shape. And then I did the same thing for the other half of the wire. Then for the top, to make it a little bit pointy and make it more ear shape, I just I put some hot glue down and folded each corner down. And then I just cut off the excess fabric at the bottom. And then I had a bunny ear, and it was actually able to stand up on its own. Then I just did this for 5 more ears. After all the ears were made, I just took 2 of them and attached them to one of the ears just by using some hot glue. I just placed some on the ears, and then I just laid the egg on top of there at the top so it looked like the ears were coming out. Then I also took the other 4 ears and placed 2 on the S and 2 on the other E. Now for the tails, I just took some of the leftover fabric, just a little scrap of it that I made the ears out of, and I just placed some hot glue on one side and then just kind of balled it up to make it look like a little tail, and then I just hot glued it to the bottom of the E, the S, and the other E. You could use cotton balls or pom-poms in place of that if you wanted to. Now what I'm doing is taking this piece of 1x2 that I already had in my garage that was cut to the perfect length actually, and it was already stained. So I just took that to place my letters on. Now I'm taking the E and I hot glued that down at the bottom. Then I took the S and I lined up where the A would go in between that, because the A is going to kind of pop out, and I went ahead and hot glued the S down first, and then I came back and hot glued the A down to the E and the S. Then I did the same thing with the T and the other E, and then the R, I hot glued that to the E and the bottom of the piece of wood.
Talking by yourself and you make me smile. I can listen all night long. I tell you about the time when I first met you. Listen to
The first DIY, I'm going to create a bunny wreath with these two light colored willow wreaths from Dollar Tree. One is bigger and one is smaller. Now I'm going to hook them together, but because I'm not going to put anything around the neck, I'm trying to hide how I hook them together with this floral wire. I just had this floral wire lying around, so I am just weaving it in between both of the wreaths in and out, so that way I make sure it's secure. So I used basically 3 pieces of wire through the wreaths and just twisted them all together, and then I just came back with some hot glue and glued that all on the back. Then when I flipped it over, it was really secure and you couldn't tell that there were wires holding it together. Now what I'm going to do is take this linen white chalk paint and just give this a real light coat to make it bright and white. Next, I'm going to create the bunny ears out of this wire from Dollar Tree, and it's just a gold wire. It's really easy to bend, so I'm just going to bend it in half and then bend it in half again to create 2 pieces, so that way I can make 2 ears. Then I just took one of the pieces and bent it in half and gave it sort of a bunny ear shape just by working with it, and then I just twisted the bottom 2 wires together to hold the shape of the ear. And then I just did the same thing to the other bunny ear, so that way I had 2 ears that looked the same.
jump into the car on a Friday night. I wanna drive with you. Looking for a bar in the
Once I shaped the ears the way I liked them, I took the rest of the wire and I just started by wrapping it down at the bottom of where the ears connected, and then I just weaved it in and out around the ear, and this is just going to give it some more depth and dimension, so that way the ear stands out a little bit more. And then I did the same thing to the other ear. I ended up using 2 packs of this wire for both ears and for the little decorative wrap that I did on them. Now I'm just going to connect the ears to the smaller top part of the wreath, which is the bunny's head. So I'm just going to weave that little piece on the bottom of the ear inside the wreath on both ears, and then I'm going to secure it together with some hot glue. You're not going to see this in the long run, so it doesn't matter how it looks as long as it's secure. Now I wanted to give my bunny a succulent crown instead of a floral crown, which I see a lot of Easter decor out there. So I had these succulents, which are from Dollar Tree. They're like a lighter color. I just think that they're really pretty. I had 2 of each, and I am just going to hot glue them down around the top of the bunny's head and around the ears to cover up that bottom part of the ears. And as you can see here, they were a little hard to hot glue, so you'll want to hot glue them down, but you want to hold them and make sure that they stay in place before you move on to the next succulent. Once the succulents were all secured down nicely, I decided it needed some moss in between the succulents. So I should have added the moss before I added the succulents, but I didn't think of it until after the fact. So I just went ahead and took some of the Spanish moss from Dollar Tree and added some hot glue and just put little clumps around the succulents and around the back of the bunny head, and it worked out perfectly. Then I just added a hanger with some twine by hot gluing it to the back, and that was it. For the second DIY, I'm going to use 3 of these ceramic bunnies from Dollar Tree. I had 2 of them from last year, so I had already taken out the hangers on the heads off of them. So this one, I'm just going to show you, I just pulled it out. You just got to be really gentle and pull it out so that way you don't break the bunny's head. You could use little needle nose pliers if that works better for you, but they're really easy to take out. Next, what I'm going to do is use a 3-pack of the small terracotta pots from Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to rest 1 pot on each bunny's head and ears. So the pot is kind of tilted a little bit on the head and the ears. I just used hot glue to secure them down, but you could use E6000 or something stronger to give it a stronger hold. Now, since a couple of my bunnies were from last year, I had already painted one of them white, I think. So I wanted everything to be cohesive. So I just went ahead and gave everything a coat of a cream colored chalk paint. So it just kind of looked everything looked cohesive and it looked like it was a ceramic from top to bottom. But I do like the terracotta pot color and the ceramic bunny if you kind of wanted to mix it up. Next, I took these flowers from Dollar Tree. I had a couple bunches left over from last year, and I just plucked the stems and the flowers off that I liked, or the leaves and the flowers off that I liked, and I just placed them inside the pots. I didn't use any styrofoam or anything. I just kind of tucked them down in each one of the pots. Lastly, I had 3 of these little chalkboard stake signs from Dollar Tree. So I just used my chalkboard marker and wrote hop on all 3 of them. And then I just placed 1 in each pot. And I think this turned out so cute for Easter.
I tell you about the time when I first met you, listening to a favorite song. Walking on the street when you caught my eye, something about the way you move. No, there ain't nobody like. So lucky to be yours.
For the last DIY, I found one of these little frames, decorative frames from Dollar Tree, and I really liked the blue color on the outside. It was like a grayish, bluish color. So I'm going to leave that color, but I'm going to go ahead and remove the middle and sand the inside, so that way it takes my paint a lot better because it's kind of like a slick surface on the inside. And I just painted it with 2 coats of white chalk paint. Now I'm going to take that middle round circle piece and I'm just going to sand it a little bit again, so that way it's not so shiny and it takes the paint a lot better. And I just mixed a little black acrylic paint and a little white chalk paint together until I got a nice little gray color that was kind of similar to the box already, the frame on the box already. And then I just painted it with a coat of that. Then I made this free printable, which I will link down below in the description box for you guys, that says "Some Bunny Loves You," and I made it so that way it would be a pretty perfect circle to fit on top of this circle already. So I just took some Mod Podge and glued it down to the top of that circle. I didn't cover it in Mod Podge because I have an inkjet printer and it will smear everywhere. So I just left that alone, and then I came back once it was dry and sanded the edges just to distress it a little bit more. Then I hot glued it back down to the center of my box. Lastly, to give my frame a little bunny detail, I'm going to be using the ears off of this little burlap basket from Dollar Tree. I just used a seam ripper to take off the ears. They were held on there by like 3 little seams, so it really wasn't hard to take off at all. And I am just going to use some hot glue to kind of glue them together at the bottom, so that way the ears have a little bit of a pucker in the middle, if that makes sense, so they're not just kind of one-dimensional. And then I hot glued them to the back of the frame. I still thought they were a little too flat, I guess, so I went ahead and brought them a little bit forward and hot glued them to the top of the frame as well to give them a little bit more of that pucker feel, to just brighten them up. I love how this little frame turned out, and I love the saying. I think it's so cute.